Yeah, we're back on the SportsMax Zone, and we're talking football with a big man of CONCACAF, the president of this confederation, Victor Montagliani, and he held a press conference today at the Jamaica Pegasus Hotel in Kingston and responded to questions about Caribbean countries hosting youth tournaments, and this is what he had to say.
Just like FIFA, FIFA lives on one competition, the World Cup. That's 95% of its budget. CONCACAF's Gold Cup is about 80% of our budget. So the reality is it's okay to move it around as it relates to a game or two, maybe even a group, but to have the significant majority of it outside a market that doesn't generate top dollar is not only unrealistic, but it's irresponsible as well. So we need to balance both.
Yeah, and I guess that comment that you just made there, Victor, would speak to what we had spoken earlier about with Jamaica upgrading its national stadium and putting itself in a position to attract major events.
Correct. I think he was asking me about events like Nations League Final Four and Gold Cups.
Yes.
And I said, there's nothing, and like we did in 2019, we brought a game here. Yeah. And obviously, the better infrastructure you have, the more games you're going to get. But we have to always be cognizant with our flagship events that generate the revenue, that they have to go to markets where you're going to get revenue, because in the end, those are the events that pay the bills, quite frankly. When people ask you, can I get development money, can I get this, can I get that? You know, that's the reality of the business. So you can move certain parts of it around to help the development, to help spike infrastructure investment. But in the end, the majority of it has to be in a market where you're going to gain the top revenue, because it's the reality of our business. And FIFA's the same way. When they give a World Cup, the revenue is the most important thing. They don't give the World Cup to develop anything. Because if they don't generate the kind of money that is required, there's no FIFA Forward program. There's nothing. And so you have to understand that it's a business in the end when you're talking about the flagship events. And yes, you can take pieces of it to dangle the carrot, but it's not realistic to move an entire event of that nature to a market that you're not going to generate as much revenue as you would in another market.
Yeah, I guess that would suggest to me then, I remember Trinidad and Tobago hosting the FIFA Under-17 World Cup a couple of decades ago.
That's fine.
And
that's okay, because it's a youth tournament.
Yes.
Youth tournaments don't generate revenue.
Yes.
They're expenditures. So FIFA will move those around. We move them around. Our youth tournaments move around everywhere. And now we've had the opportunity, because there's been investment through CONCACAF and through FIFA Forward, we have more members that have good facilities to move them around. And it's helped us in the Nations League, where we centralize, especially in League B and League C, we centralize groups. And so a group that has, for instance, Bermuda, Antigua, Dominican Republic, and I think it's St. Vincent, but I'm not sure. Each one of them will host. It cuts down on the expenditures, but they can host because they also have facilities. Yes. On the youth, yes, and we're also building a home of football, which we announced already last year. We did an RFP, and we're going to build it in Dominican Republic, and that will have pitches, we'll have a little stadium, and we'll have a lot of our events there from a development standpoint, some of the youth as well. So as you can see, it's important to build for us a home of football for our members, and it's their home of football. But so the youth can move around for sure.
Yeah, but the Dominican Republic, as it now stands, does have good facilities and does host a huge chunk of regional football, doesn't it?
Yeah, they've stepped it up from that perspective. They do have good facilities. They have a good league as well, in terms of a professional league, and they do quite well in the regional competitions. A lot of their teams even get into the Champions Cup, and so yeah, the DR has. It seems to be transforming from a baseball country to a football country.
Yeah, and as you say that, I want to go to this. Club rankings, because you just mentioned the Dominican Republic upgrading their clubs, and Cibao FC, I think, is the highest ranked Caribbean Football Union team in the CONCACAF club rankings. But I want to use this opportunity, President, to talk about growing the Caribbean game from the club perspective, which is what you pointed out earlier on, that CONCACAF now wants to use these club tournaments to help to develop the infrastructure of these Caribbean teams, because we have a graphic here that shows the huge gap between clubs from the USA and Mexico and other parts of the Caribbean. The top 10 completely, Columbus Crew, Tigres, Club America, completely USA and Canada. The highest ranked club team in CONCACAF outside of the USA and Mexico would be the Canadian team. Well, I'm not saying you're the Vancouver Whitecaps, but we know you're a Canadian, but they're from your country. 27th president, and the highest rated Caribbean team on the CONCACAF club rankings, Cibao FC from the Dominican Republic at 81st, Cavalier from Jamaica 88th, Robin Hood from Suriname 95th, and Mount Pleasant from Jamaica 99th. Only 4 Caribbean countries in the top 100 as far as the club rankings are concerned. Now, this would be concerning to a Caribbean football fan, because we would like to see our teams propel themselves into more prominent positions in CONCACAF club rankings. And as you see there, the Canadians aren't that hot at 27th, so there's work to be done.
Correct. And how you do that is with a proper strategy, with proper discipline, and obviously you have to have patience. Now, a lot of those results are historical. You know, you have the MLS that is, what, 30 years old? You have Mexico, it's even older than that. Obviously, there's economics that come into play. And rankings are just based on results. That's it. It has nothing to do, whereas club licensing is about standards, your coaching standards, your facility standards, and all that. So, but, you know, what metamorphosized Europe about 25 years ago to what it is today is club licensing. So the clubs had to hit the standards. And we're starting to do that. And the discipline, for instance, you know, you can't have a coach sit on the sideline of a Caribbean Shield or the Caribbean Cup or CONCACAF Champions Cup that is not licensed, that has not gone his or her licenses. And when we first got into this, clubs were making all the excuses in the world because, oh, no, he's my mate. Well, okay.
I want him to be the coach.
If you want your mate to coach, then there you go. There's your ranking, right? So the reality is that we've just started this process. And you know, we've had snippets of professionalism in the Caribbean with leagues, but now you're starting to see more of it. You know, you see what's happening here in Jamaica, what's happening in the DR. St. Lucia just launched theirs, right? With
a semi-pro league.
Correct. Right. I know that Trinidad is now getting back on their feet. I suspect that's going to start rolling as well. So it's about professionalizing the leagues, right? In terms of standards, club licensing, and then obviously facilities. And if you start doing that, you start getting better players that get better results. And with us empowering the CFU to start with the Caribbean Shield, and then that goes on to the Caribbean Cup. Now when you get teams coming out of there, they're going to start, you know, they're always, listen, in the end, those clubs in Mexico, US, they are what they are. It's no different than any other jurisdiction in the world, right? But you're going to see some shocking results happening because you're following the process of that discipline. And you're going to see eventually Caribbean clubs coming up the rankings, you know, when they get into a Champions Cup and they got a home and away. And that almost happened with Cibao, actually. They almost knocked off a Mexican team. Right? And so you got one of those happening, there's a cascading effect to that, right? But, you know, you got to realize that, you know, the players in our leagues in the Caribbean and in Central America and in Canada, because they have a league there too, those are leagues that are to develop the players to go on to another level. It's just the reality of football now. In Europe, it's the same. You know, Belgium and Dutch league, those players, where do they go, right? They get bought by your club at Man United for $600 million, right? And they go to England, they go to Italy. It's just
Germany.
It's just the pyramid of football. And so we have to be realistic what the pyramid of football is, even in our region. But that doesn't mean the quality has to dip just because, you know, you don't have the same economics as Mexico. You can still have the same standards, and to us, that's very important.
And I think Jamaica is a perfect example of that, because in my short time being here, you know, they have a Leon Bailey. They have little Kaim Dixon, who's been stepping up.
Yeah, I saw him play the other night.
DeJean Whisper for Chelsea.
Yeah.
I heard that a new player is going to sign for Chelsea very soon.
Yes.
So I think when you say that, I get that point, right? So is it that you make these recommendations to the president about when it comes to rankings and everything, and then you leave it up to them to ensure that they execute these structures that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the rankings is just a formula that our competitions department runs. It's just math.
Yeah.
You know, you've played X games, you've won, lost, draw. You've played this level of competition, and that has a certain score. That's it. With respect to everything else, through our development department and our competitions department, but mainly through our development department, that's where you get into club licensing, standards, coaching convention, all that. That's headed by Jason Roberts. You know, all that is sort of underpinning now the growth of these leagues.
Yeah.
And like I said, in Jamaica is a great example of the club licensing, how it's gone from zero to this.
Just recently, we had a controversial issue with a top coach in Jamaica being barred from coaching on the sidelines because he hadn't been certified. And people are saying everyone knows he's a good coach. Yeah. But it's a matter of the governing body putting standards in place 100%. To ensure that the coaches are properly certified to coach, even though we may know that they are reasonably good coaches.
You know, if players that won the World Cup for countries like Germany and Italy are not all allowed on the sidelines, and they won a World Cup for their country, they're not allowed on the sidelines for licensing, I'm sure it's okay for the Federation and League here to tell that Jamaican coach, you know what, go get your licensing, right? Again, right?
I want to ask you quickly about the preparations for the 2026 World Cup, because never before in the history of FIFA World Cup finals have we seen 3 countries host a World Cup. USA has hosted before by themselves, Mexico hosted by themselves before, but never before 3 teams, and Canada has never hosted before. So 2026 will be historic. Is CONCACAF ready for that?
Yeah, listen, I think the 3 nations are ready for it. I mean, the hosting models change a bit. FIFA really runs the show. It's not like in the old days where you had a hosting committee. Just because it's so big now, 48 teams, 104 games, 3 countries, security, all the logistics around it. But yeah, I mean, you know, first of all, North America is so used to putting on big events. So the cities, for instance, the 16 cities that have been picked, there are cities that put on Super Bowls, Formula One races, keep going, right? So they're used to that. So I'm not worried about the nuts and bolts of it, and you know, the ticketing and the sellout crowds. That's all going to be taken care of. You know, from a CONCACAF perspective, we have one goal. Originally, is we want 8 teams to qualify. So 3 already have because they host. 3 can qualify directly once. You know, we've already started World Cup qualifying, and we have 2 that can go to a playoff. So that's 8.
Yeah.
So we want 8 to qualify. Okay. Then we want half of those to get out of the group stage. Okay. Then we want half of those to get to the quarterfinals, and we want 1 to get to the semifinal. And I've said that to the 41 presidents, and I said, the challenge is yours. I'm not saying which countries are going to do that. Obviously, sitting here in Jamaica, I think I know already your answer. And I probably know your answer from a Trinidad perspective.
Yeah, I'm Trini.
To get back to the World Cup after so many years.
Yeah.
But listen, there's a lot of countries that you know, have that dream and that vision to get there for 26. You know, I think there could be a few shockers, as we've already seen in the Nations League.
Yeah, and before we wrap up your chat with us, Victor, the diaspora issue that you just spoke of, we have teams like French Guiana, Curacao, Suriname, who have a lot of players who are playing in Europe, playing in the Netherlands and so on, and France. So the quality of the player competing now in the Nations League and competing internationally for some of the Caribbean countries, way different from what we had 30, 40 years ago.
Correct. Yeah, it is, and this is what I said. I mean, it's to your original question. I mean, it's all nice to have, you know, great memories of a local competition, but the reality is that's not the business of football anymore. And football is a business. Let's not fool ourselves.
Yes.
It's a business. It's a global business. Our federations know it. That's why they're scouting all the time. That's why they're getting calls to find players wherever they need to find them to get better. And whether it's in your, like you just said, Suriname, or even here in Jamaica, where you have players that are coming to play for Jamaica because of their ancestry, it's a competitive world. And if you want to compete at the world level, and you see it with major countries.
Yes.
Major countries that historically have won the World Cups are now getting players. I mean, Italy got a player from Brazil who showed up to camp, didn't speak a word of Italian.
Wow.
Like, you would have never heard that 20 years ago.
That's
so
right.
if they're doing that, right, because it's a competitive world.
Yeah, I get you. President Victor Montagliani, CONCACAF boss, great talking to you here on the SportsMax.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you in Jamaica. Great that you had the St. Lucian President Lyndon Cooper and Mark Wade from Bermuda. Also
they were visiting the
part of the
JFF,
visit.
yes.
And the JFF big wigs, Michael Ricketts, the president, and Dennis Chung, the Gen Sec, a part of your entourage. So I hope you enjoy the remaining hours here in Jamaica. I know you have a JPL game to watch later on.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Safe travels to Bonaire and then Guyana. And we hope to see you again soon.
Yeah, and I promise next time it won't be 7 years. And I promise next time to send you the memo that we don't match jackets.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Victor, thank you very much. Always
Cheers,
great
thank
having
you.
the CONCACAF boss on the SportsMax Zone. We go to break. Still a lot more to come on the SportsMax Zone after this.